life around you, or starting to fall into a more mundane kind of life.
Can you say that again?
How does one cope with the concept of sort of growing up and realizing that the novelties of life are behind you, that the new experiences are, you've had them all, and everything seems more mundane now, and you're starting to fall into just a boring old life?
You know, long-term relationships are interesting because you don't really start them as long-term. They're just, as you say, novelties. You find yourself attracted to someone, then you have all sorts of fantasies, you know. You become very future-oriented with that particular person, and then you become a very cunning and ruthless political animal in the sense that you kind of walk around trying to figure out how you can approach this person, how you can get their number, how you can chat with them. Morning. And you're still inspired and excited. I mean, that's the fuel that drives you. And then as you inch closer to this person, and as conversations begin, as you become more and more intimate as the days go on. Good morning. In some ways, certain things become less interesting, less inspiring. I suppose other things become more interesting when it comes to kind of just the crummy people that we are. And given the fact that this is such a physically driven culture, we kind of gear, first of all, towards physical intimacy, and then we talk about becoming roommates, and house, and car, and children, and sharing bank accounts, and cell phones, and all that. And then there comes a point where, you know, every relationship is like a Mount Everest. There is a tip. Hello. Beyond which you can go. There is no other place to go. The conversations you've had plenty, the sex you've had plenty, the talking about money you've had plenty, and then you kind of sit there, not knowing exactly what to talk about. And the things that used to bring so much joy no longer do. In a culture such as this, where everybody wants to be happy, and Americans are weird in the sense that everybody feels as if life owes them something. I didn't show up to class, but you owe me an A or a passing grade. I know I only spent 5 minutes writing the essay, but at least, you know, I tried. That deserves at least a C. You don't find this sort of attitude anywhere on this planet except in America, you know, a sense of entitlement. And so there is this notion that all of us have and we are walking around with, which is, I need my relationship to always be one of romance, inspiring, exciting. And so the moment things become just casual and you find yourself under an avalanche of responsibilities and obligations that don't really excite you, you're always looking for a way out. And, you know, America is a nice place for that because there's so many options. Add to the fact that you can go out with someone and dump them and go out with another person 1,000 different times because the element of shame is absent from this culture, you know. And one of the things that glues people together and makes sure that they don't cross certain lines is that, you know, the component of shame kind of glues you. You may not like your wife or your companion or whatever, but just in case you walk away, what are you going to say to your mom? What are you going to say to your neighbor? What are you going to say to your teacher? All these things impact your self-image, your confidence, your future. And so not to bring shame upon yourself or your family, you will do the best you can with what little you have in life. Hello, hello. Where the hell was I? Um,
May not like it.
You're talking about shame.
yeah. There is the other thing also is that Americans get things far too early in life. I mean, when you're 18, you have a car. You know, when you're 18, you move out of your parents and you experience independence. When you're 18, you have your own savings and checking account. You have a girlfriend, you have sex, you drink, you smoke, you do all sorts of stupid things. And you fall in love, like the moment you're 12. And by the time you get to be 20, there is nothing left to life to experience. You've done all of it by the time you're like 20. When you go to other cultures, man, you have to wait till like 35 or 40 to kind of be able to buy a car, to buy a house, to move on, move away from your parents and live on your own. And so the hopes and the dreams you have about buying a car will kind of sustain you and drive you for like 30 years. Here, your parents buy you a car at the age of 17. You go to high school, you have like 50 times sex a day. You smoke too much, drink too much, you have just too much fun. And so what happens is when you have too much life inside you at such an early age, well, for the next 6 years, life really doesn't have much to offer you. And that's where capitalism comes in this particular shape and form, because it always produces something that can tantalize or get an emotional rise out of you. Your cell phone is fine. There is nothing wrong with your phone. What's wrong is your life is just boring. It's not going anywhere. So how can we distract you so you don't fall into boredom and, God forbid, commit suicide or fall into chronic depression? Well, just buy a brand new phone that'll occupy you for the next 6 months. And so what you have in this particular type of culture and this particular kind of capitalism is life is just one of damage control, because at any moment, awful things could happen. The worst, boredom. People complain about school being expensive. You guys only pay like $200 a class. That's it. You can't even be able to enroll in college other places on this planet. You have to be very, very, very rich. People complain because a book is expensive. It's nothing. American education, in as much as it sucks, no one really learns anything and people are just stupid. It's very inexpensive. You just go in there, get your degree, go out, get a good job. But no, it's too much for people. Now, there is nothing wrong with having sex at the age of 18, but something definitely wrong with you having sex at the age of 10 or 12. And I guess what I'm trying to say by that is the following. Boredom is a fact of life. Being unhappy and miserable is a fact of life. But it's much better for you to be bored and miserable at the age of 40 than at the age of 20. So what happens to American culture and American psyche is that instead of experiencing those facts of life much later in life, right? I mean, look, one of the ways you experience divorce is you're married with your companion for about 20, 30, 40 years. He or she has a heart attack and dies. Now your grieving process begins. How old are you? Well, you're like 50. And you've had 30 years of marriage, memories, experiences. It's been relatively healthy. Here, you kind of get emotionally entangled with someone at the age of 18 and things fall apart at the age of 20. I mean, that's a mini divorce. By the time you get to be 35, 40, you've gone through so many different paths where you're married emotionally with someone, then you divorce them through a breakup, that you're kind of just not digestible for anyone, not even yourself. So here things happen to people much more quickly. So to answer your question, how do you keep your life going knowing that there is nothing exciting out there? If you happen to have resources, try to distract yourself as much as you possibly can. If on the other hand, you've come to realize that distraction is part of your cunningness, that you reflect on it and it bothers you, that you can't really distract yourself, and every time you do, you catch yourself, I don't really know. This is really not your problem. I think what happens in a culture where tsunamis are created, people assume that this is their personal tsunami, this is their personal struggle, when in fact this wave is coming at you. And it's just not you, it's your entire community, you know. And so when you have the divorce rate being 60%, when you have loneliness and depression close to 70%, where about almost 68% of your students have been medicated, what you're talking about is a cultural wave. It's not about you. It's about like 50 of us in this room. Out of the 50, 35 people are sad and depressed and lonely. There isn't much you can do with this. You know, in as much as there are lots of how-to books out there like IKEA, go to aisle 5, you know, take box 9 home and put it together and there you have it. It doesn't work that way. There is in India this particular set of stages you go through. First, you're a kid, you have fun. You go out there, you steal things, you break things, you know, you get into fights. I mean, this is what kids do, and there's nothing wrong with it. Then there comes a point where you go to school, and it's not really your choice. People will beat you up, slap you, kick you, punch you, and they'll send you to school. And they don't really care how much you want to whine or scream or yell. And even if you do too much of yelling in school, the instructors will hit you. As I was hit many times in India as well as Iran. I didn't come out traumatized. You know, the culture just said, listen, you misbehave, we'll kick you. That's it. Okay? Then you stay in school for a while. Then your parents know what's going on. You're at a certain age where you want to have sex, you want to have fun. But because you're an adult now, the nature of your fun must be different. So they'll get you married. Remember, these are stages you go through. You don't drink at the age of 5. You don't smoke at the age of 15. Okay? You kind of graduate into them. And so you go out there, you get a job, then you get married. By the time you're 40, you have 2, 3, 4, 5 kids. Now, what's nice about this particular system is the following. You've had the opportunity just being a kid and just peeing on everything that you see. And the culture is fine with it. Then there comes a point where it's not really up to you to look at your parents and say, I hate school, I want to drop out. It's not an option. You stay in school, you suck it up. Okay? And you learn how to be responsible for things that you don't like. It doesn't matter how boring I am. It doesn't matter how offensive I am. This is a class you goddamn need to graduate, so stay in it. Nobody cares for your emotions. You're insignificant. Okay? And then you get a job. Not because you need to create your own savings account or checking account. Your money goes into the pocket of the community, your parents, your siblings, this and that. So from the very beginning, you understand that whatever wealth you accumulate, you share that. There is nothing individualistic about your life. Nothing belongs to you. Okay? But then at a certain point, your parents say, listen, we have a couple of options. Our son can either become a gigolo, okay, or he can get married. Now, you don't really have the option of choosing your own companion because you're just an 18-year-old punk. What the hell do you know about life? Nothing. You're far too stupid to know anything about life. So your parents kind of begin this quest to find you a companion. Does she come from a right neighborhood? Does she have good parents? Do they smoke? Do they drink? Do they watch porn? What kind of friends does she have? Did she go to school? Who is she? What is she? Okay? It's because they realize that if you want to live a relatively healthy life, the bling is not as interesting for them. Who cares if your car looks really, really good, but the moment you open the hood, you realize the engine doesn't work? What sort of a car is that? It's useless. So it's useless for you to have a very, very attractive companion, but psychologically just broken. And she's all over the place. And life is a long road. A bad companion means you're stranded in the middle of the highway every 10 minutes. Okay? And some of us in this class have experienced that. You know, you go out with a piece of a shit of a guy or a stupid woman, and every 10 minutes they kind of nag. You know, they have an emotional crisis. You know, and every time you want to fly, they just drag you down. You go home in a good mood, and within 10 seconds, shit is all over you. Okay? But now you're emotionally entangled, you can't do much. So, kind of like the CIA, FBI, they do some background check. Okay? And then you're like 20, 25, and your parents look at you and say, listen, we know that sex is going to get boring soon. One of the ways that we're going to make sure that your relationship doesn't suffer too many hiccups, have children. And you have kids, Richard. What does that kids do? They won't leave you alone. The moment you want to sit back and say, am I really happy? My diaper. I want milk. I want toys. Take me to the park. Now, you may resent everything that you do for them, but nevertheless, they'll occupy you for the next 17, 18 years. How old are you now? Well, you're now 50. How old is your kid? Like 20, right? You've had the fun of a kid. You've had the burden of going to school, being responsible. You've had the job. You've had the wife. You've had the sex. You've had the fun. You've had the kid. You've raised them. Now you're 50. You look at your life and you say, it's okay, not bad. Now comes another stage in your development, which is you sit back and you say, I'm getting a little older, and my life doesn't really amount to much. You know, I don't want to have sex with my wife. I don't want to hang out with people and have serious conversation. My kids are grown. You know, I'll do what I can to help them up, but for the most part, they don't really need me. Now what happens, instead of your focus being outward, your focus becomes inward. You know, it's kind of like the story of Malcolm X. Okay? For the first few years of his life, his experience always had to do with the things outside. Let me dye my hair orange. I want other people to like me. You know, I want to steal this. I want to do that. The moment he ends up in prison, someone goes to him and says, you know what? Instead of your focus always being out, turn your focus within. You know, and so at the age of 50 or 55, what happens, at least within the Hindu perspective, is you've been living outside of yourself for too long. The kingdom of God lives within you. And they have an entire spiritual structure. They have all sorts of narratives. They have teachers who are not mocked. You know, they don't like create movies like Jesus Christ Superstar in the 1970s. You know, they don't talk about the gospel of Judas. No one mocks Jesus Christ. There are no atheism the way we know it today. You know, so everything is housed within a very sacred space. And so at a certain point, they say, your task as a man or as a householder has come to an end. Maybe you should now turn your vision inward and become a bit more spiritual. Now what you do is you have a 2-car garage, you cut the garage door in half, okay? The 2-car garage now becomes a 1-car garage, okay? And the other half, you turn it into a room. And in that room, you kind of have your books, you have your desk, you have your laptop, you sit every night for about 5-6 hours, you know? Because by the time you get to be 55, you will realize that life really has nothing to offer you. From that point on, it's groundhog. You do the same thing over and over and over and over again. And what happens when you do something over and over again? Boredom is sure going to knock on your door and say, listen, I know you've been smoking. I know you've been drinking. I know you've been porning. I know you've been busying yourself with 1,001 things, but I'm never going to go anywhere. I'm right there next to you. I'm just going to tell you, at this stage in your life, there is nothing you can do to distract yourself anymore. You know. Now, I don't really know what the solution is to overcoming boredom at such a... I'm sorry? If you happen to have the temperament, if you like, you know, going across the world to see how other people live, you know, that's one option. If on the other hand, you happen to be somewhat reflective, I mean, look, people travel for different reasons. Some people travel to Italy because every 10 minutes, there's a church you go into. Every 20 minutes, there's a cathedral. You know, it's a very communal environment. The city is alive. You know, and you feel safe and it feels homey. Some people enjoy that. Some people go there with a purpose. I just want to go there to visit the cathedrals or the museums or to figure out how France became what it is today. They do it for more historical, anthropological reasons. Okay. If these are not your purpose, if this is not your goal, you don't really much care about the country itself, you have a specific goal. It's like a couple years ago, this particular book was found somewhere in Egypt. It was brought to America, tried to be sold in different places, universities, but the price was way too high. So about 5 or 6 and this particular book happened to be the Gospel of Judas. Now, National Geographic gave money to certain scholars telling them, listen, would you like to come to Egypt and come to this place and to that place to figure out what we're doing? Is it true that these people got themselves on the plane to travel? Absolutely. Did they have a specific reason to go to Egypt or to go to France? Definitely. They wanted to understand better how this book, the Gospel of Judas, came about. Traveling is good, you know. So, but it requires a lot of money and a nice companion. You know. I don't know what the solution is. I could give you a set of bumper stickers, but they're useless. You know, what you have running against you is a culture that has created narratives that don't serve human beings well. You know, that's number one. Then you have capitalism and all the ways it advertises to the human being and turns his or her brain into mush. Okay. And then you have the concept of individualism. That even if you're miserable, even if someone is out there to help you, you don't ask for help. You don't want help. It's like beneath you. You know. The other is the stupid concept of equality. You and I are not equal. Do we shit? Yeah. Do we burp? Yeah. Do we walk? Yes. But as a 62-year-old man, I have seen things and I've been to places that you haven't. You want a degree? I have it. You want a house? I have it. You want a marriage? I have it. You want children? I have it. All the things you want for yourself for the next 15, 20 years, I have them. That doesn't make us equal. That makes me much more better. Especially if I process things well. So you have all sorts of things running against you, and now you're bored. How old are you? Well, you're like 25. You have no right to be bored, man. You're too young. There is one bumper sticker option. If you can't be the source of your own inspiration, and if you find that people in your life can't inspire you either, find someone who can inspire you. Just go on this quest. It's like taking classes. You know, you open the door at the very beginning of the semester, you put your head in, first you look at the instructor. There is an antenna inside you that says, I like, I don't like. If you don't like, shut the door, go your way. If you like their physical presence, walk in. Hear what they have to say for 5-10 minutes. You know, and sit back and ask yourself, are they appealing to my intellect? Are they appealing to my emotions? Are they appealing to both? Is there something else that's coming out of me? You know, is there like a soul that's being inspired? If you find those people, hang on to them and use them, manipulate them as long and as much as you can. You know, I mean, again, I go back to the prophet of the 20th century, Malcolm X. Elijah Muhammad was a source of inspiration for him for a long time, until he gained some autonomy. He was able to sit back and think and reflect and ask himself, well, why would Elijah Muhammad do A, B, C, D? Why would he say EFGH? Okay. And all of a sudden he realized, well, he doesn't really need Elijah Muhammad. He doesn't even need the Black Muslim Brotherhood. He doesn't need any of that shit. He can do all of that on his own. He has enough resources within to not only inspire himself, but also inspire other people. You know? So if he can find someone like an Elijah, use and manipulate this person for as long as you're allowed to. At a certain point, you're going to look at Jesus and say, you know what, I've heard all these stories, they're not interesting anymore. No thing down here has an infinite amount or is the infinite source of excitement and inspiration. It doesn't matter what it is or who is. So, the other basic fact of life is it's just crap. Most of it is. It's just busy work. I read the essays that some of you submitted. Such a waste of my time to read them. I mean, people just like stringing words together as if they understand anything. It's a good distraction though. I mean, you may not like me, but the very fact that this class can occupy your time, you know, for 5-6 hours a week, keep you away from boredom, you should shower me with gifts. Without me, you'd fall into boredom. Probably smoke too much, drink too much, you know. Does it? Are we? Yeah. Cain? Danielle?
Do you believe faith?
In what?
Do you believe in faith, or do you think that we're responsible for our reality?
Those things don't matter. I'll give it to you in this other way. Imagine you and I in a relationship. Can you imagine that? Okay. If I say I love you, will you believe me?
Depends on.
No, you believe me. We have just began, you're in love, I'm in love. I say I love you, you say thank you, I love you too. You have faith. Unless you've been broken in the past, you walk into the relationship with doubts, you're like torn in 1,001 pieces. I'm not talking about unhealthy human beings. This is our first relationship. You love, I love.
Early on, I wouldn't say that.
Good.
Or believe.
Okay. So you have faith in my love for you, and you have faith in I have faith in your love for me, right? Be all hands. We kiss, we make out, all sorts of things. Then we get into a fight, like a big fight, where I slam the door shut. What happened to your faith? What happened to the relationship? The moment, and this is one of the things you need to understand, anytime you are tested, whatever you believed goes out the window. Only when the negative experiences have been forgotten, then your faith comes back. But it won't be as strong as it used to be. One of the best books you can ever read in your life that talks about faith, the loss of faith, loneliness, depression, and then retrieval, getting back your faith, is the book of Job in the Old Testament. It's perhaps the oldest book of the Old Testament before Genesis, before all these books, was the book of Job. Yeah. It's about 30 pages, 40 pages, 50 pages, beautiful poetry. Sorry? 31 pages, beautiful poetry. It's about a man who believed. It's about a God who believed. The only person who knew that whenever you are tested in life, you will fall apart is Satan. That's the only entity, at least initially in the book, who knows that whenever anyone is tested, they will fall apart. And Job did. Job fell apart. So did God. It takes a long, long time for God to understand what faith really means. And it takes a long time for Job to understand what faith really is. So what usually happens, I think, is the following. First, you have faith. And this particular faith is a software given to you by your parents, by media, by the church you go to, the books you read, the friends you got. it creates like manufactures faith, but you don't really understand it too well. And you actually think that you are a decent, mature human being, right? And then you get into a relationship. And one of the nice things about relationships is that they test you. You don't take out the trash. You thought you were mature and quite observant and you pay attention to things. And your companion always keeps reminding you, God damn it, take out the trash. Wash the dishes. I am so tired of doing A, B, C, D for you. You're like a 25-year-old guy. Grow up, right? And then every time she reminds you what a despicable human being you are, you become angry. And instead of showing some maturity, going through some revisions, recreating yourself, reinventing yourself, you guys just get into a tiff. She's right, you're wrong, right? And then she leaves you. And what happens when she leaves you? Well, you go home, there's no one there. You sleep by yourself. You eat by yourself. You watch movies by yourself. When you have like a fight with your boss and you want to go home and talk to someone about it, there's no one there. So your isolation grows, your depression grows. Okay? All of a sudden you say, man, I want her back. And it's not because you're a bad-looking guy, and it's not because you don't have any options out there. You've come to realize that she's really, really a good human being. She's a good companion to you. So what do? You crawl back. Okay? For the first time, you've come to realize, well, you thought you were mature, but you're really not. And the moment she says, I will come back, we'll have the relationship on a few conditions. And now you really work hard to grow up. And once you gain some maturity, you have faith now that there are certain things you will never forget, and there are certain things you will never do, and there are certain things you will always do. And you can always believe that you will do those things. Why? You were tested, you failed, you practiced, you learned, you became really, really good and proficient. Now you do them. They're part of who and what you are.
I made a mistake. It's 42.
42 book, yeah. 42 pages? Oh, 42 chapters. Yeah. If you don't like to read, just listen to it on YouTube. Yeah. Yeah, Elise.
Is it Joan as in Jon or
It's J-O-B.
J-O?
Yeah, job.
Oh, job.
Yeah. It's French. Yeah, Rosalind.
External sources because we talked about how, especially in America, they like to sell you distractions and quick fixes and other things. So is it possible just dependent on external sources and not
I think all of us in life, regardless of your skin color, of your gender, sexual orientation, the culture from which you come, there are these moments in life that an event takes place. You could be the most callous, the most stupid of human beings, but you love your mom. Your mom dies all of a sudden. That pain causes you to retreat, go inward and reflect. It could only be for 2 minutes. It doesn't really matter. But that reflection creates a disturbance in the way you feel about life, feel about yourself. Okay? You begin to grow a good amount of self-hatred. It's kind of like right now. You're sitting in this class, you ask like silly questions, and I say even more silly things, and then someone comes in with a weapon. All of a sudden, something happens to you. You begin to think differently, feel differently. There is an urgency about you that you didn't have 10 minutes ago. So whenever life delivers a hardship, you're forced to reflect. And reflection means you stand outside of yourself, outside of your life, and you look in, and you're not going to like what you see. Not very many of us can stand outside of our life and say, you know what, this has been a life well lived. The people who lived really, really healthy and valuable and good lives, I'll share with you a few of them. Socrates, when he was told that they're going to kill him, He says, fuck it. I'd rather die than be amongst you guys. I've lived enough. I've talked enough. I've had the wife, the kids. This is no good. I'd rather die. Jesus, sure, he had some doubts in the garden. Sure, he had some doubts on the cross, but eventually he said, you know what? These people suck. I don't want to be here either. Malcolm, he knows he's going to get crucified. He doesn't really care. Okay. Now, which means that upon reflection, they come to realize there is only really one valuable thing to do in life: to think really well about society, about politics, about success, about happiness, about what it means to be a human being. And if you have found your own gospel, if you have kind of found your own truth as to how things are or aren't, share them with other people. That's the only thing you want. That's the only traveling worth having or going. You don't need to go to France. Find any human being, see if you can travel into their mind and convince them, or at least help them see things differently. Okay? And there comes a point where you realize that, you know what? It's no good. Death is much preferable than living down here. Okay? Now, for most of us who don't live life healthily or well, or it has really no value, so we just write essays to get a passing grade and go our way. You're not going to save your essay for your grandkids telling them, this is what I wrote when I was at Laney College. You're like 85 and you're very proud of what you did at 20. No, most of it is trashed. Okay? So no one is exempt. There are no special people. One of the things I hated about Ronald Reagan, do you know who he is? For those of you who may not know, he was the first American woman president.
The first.
Yes. He was a man. So I'm only saying that because most of you are so young. You would think that when you get to be a little older, you kind of sit back as a politician, you say, man, the redlining, districting and redistricting, bullying people around, robbing them of this, forcing them, to get fired from this and that. Now you're like 70 or 80 or 90. And it's a really good time to kind of be punished by your own psyche, the things you see about yourself. And you realize that the only things that people will remember you by are all the awful things you've done to them. But you know what happened to Reagan? He began to forget everything. He began to forget his name, her name, all the awful things he did. But most of us are not as lucky. You have no choice but once in a while to look yourself in the mirror and not like what you see. But because again, we are cunning enough and have a good amount of resources to distract ourselves, you'll forget, which is a blessing in many ways. Not a single one of us in this classroom have like a happy relationship. It goes up, comes down, goes up, comes down. There are days you want to walk out, there are days you say, this is beautiful, But because you have a tendency of forgetting those bad days, we, hang on for a better tomorrow. That's how it is. Yes? Sarah? Mackay? Is it?
Yeah.
Anything?
How do you think, Marxism could be applied to our individual?
Well, you can't. No. Yeah, there has been this relentless hammering of making communism, socialism, Marxism, things that are just evil. And they've been hammered into the American psyche. I doubt even politicians who kind of get together, and we see them on YouTube, kind of like that. Who's that prick? Robert F. Kennedy. I mean, he looks bad, he sounds bad, everything about him smells bad. He yells out, socialism is bad. And there is no one out there asking, well, can you tell me what socialism really is? He's just one of those pricks. But Look, you can have a private system in two ways. Either the government controls it, okay? The government owns everything and then it, hands those things to people. And then you can have people like Musk, Bezos, individual people, So if the government does it, it's very, very different than when it's in the hands of just a few individuals. And these are not, Musk and Bezos and Zuckerberg. These are not like saints. These are like extension of more pricks in the political arena. Anyone? Wolf?
You know Gilgamesh?
Gilgamesh, yes.
You know how you pretty much actually love Enkidu, like what do you do after, like, for someone like him to lose someone else? What do you do with life after?
Okay, so a little background for those of you who may not know. The Epic of Gilgamesh was part of the oral tradition, and by oral, I mean someone speaks and then someone listens. There is no writing at this stage. No one reads, no one knows how to read, no one knows how to write because they haven't yet been invented. Is that your way to Jesus? So, at a certain point, writing comes to be invented first in Egypt and then other places. And for the first time, a story that was about maybe 5,000 to 10,000 years old gets written down. And so, where was I?
Egypt's story.
Yeah, that's right. Egypt was born.
And nobody knew how to read it.
That's right, like today. So, what happens to Gilgamesh is that he is the carbon copy image of the gods. Everything about him, I don't know if you know who Cristiano Ronaldo is. If you have seen any Greek sculptures, for example, of the human body, the Greeks, they were fantastic and fascinating, people who for the first time came to realize it's not enough to just have a physical body. You need to have six-pack. You need to have a chiseled jaw. You need to have high cheekbones. You need to be very, very muscular. Why? Because both within as well as without, you need to be as perfect as possible. And so they kind of rised up to create, whether it was a temple they wanted to build or writing they wanted to write or ideas they wanted to express, they wanted perfection and nothing less. And so that's who and what Gilgamesh was. But the perfection that lived inside Gilgamesh was housed in a thing called the physical body. Okay? You want to come to class and be inspired. You want to raise your hand and ask your question eloquently. But all of a sudden you realize you lack experience. So that's deficiency on your part. You also don't have enough vocabulary. That's another deficiency. That's you speaking in public and you're kind of embarrassed and ashamed. You get nervous and you have panic attacks. That's another deficiency. And all of a sudden you realize all the perfection that lives inside you must now come out in physical containers. And so all of a sudden, even though your ideas or your emotions are absolutely divine, the way they come out, they just smell bad. So what happens in Gilgamesh is that, well, he wants to be monogamous, but he can't. He wants to be kind to people, but he's drunk with power, And what you have in this particular epic is that if there is anyone who has forgotten that the kingdom of God lives inside them, and by kingdom of God, you don't need to make it religious. If you want to be like a tennis pro, if you want to be a soccer pro, if you want to be a poet, if you want to be a great carpenter, if you have any talent and you want this talent to come out, if you want be compassion compassionate and generous to everyone out there, like Mother Teresa, what you have is not only your flesh working against you, but also the culture working against you. You want to mind your own business, but all of a sudden you're walking to school and some 18-year-old punk is driving a Rolls. And you say, there is injustice. And that occupies you for the next 5, 6, 7, 10 years. And so the gods kind of get together and say, Gilgamesh has forgotten who he is. How do we remind him? They say, well, there's only really one way that you could baptize and reform any human being who's forgotten. Love. And it can be a cheesy love. You can't love someone's body. You can't love someone's emotions. You can't love someone's intellect. You need to love their soul. But for you to be able to love anyone's soul, a couple of things are necessary. First, the person you're in love with must have a soul. Second, you must be at a certain place in your own spiritual growth where you only see souls and not bodies and not emotions. Okay? And what are some of the, I suppose, qualifications of those who have a soul? Well, the guy's name is Enkidu. And Enkidu basically means being innocent. And innocence means your stomach is full and you're happy with what you have in your belly and you're happy with the amount of food you ate. And as you walk college, there is Zachary's Pizza, but you don't really care. Then you pass by Barney's, you don't really care. And then you pass by another place, you don't really care. Why? You are happy with what you have. You cannot be tempted. So when it comes to food, you are innocent. There is no lust inside you. There is no envy inside you. There is no jealousy inside you. You are absolutely perfect. Okay? Now, Enkidu didn't need anything. He didn't want human civilization. He didn't want friendships. He lived in nature. And by nature, I don't mean he lived in Yosemite. I mean, he lived like Malcolm X, in the middle of garbage, but there was something about his mind that he was able to make ideas, create ideas from nothing. He could see injustice, but he could speak about it eloquently in ways that other people couldn't. And also he had a wife who had a tremendous amount of understanding for who and what he was. And so she left him alone. So that innocence that lived inside Malcolm remained intact. Okay. So what happens is, if you want to baptize someone who's forgotten, you need to find someone who's cleansed, who's been cleansed from the inside, or perhaps is not contaminated. And so the gods make this plan that these two folks need to come together. Now look, what you usually have is, if someone has a soul, but you also have a soul, but you've forgotten that you have a soul, what usually happens is they're going to counter everything about you. You say, I want to go to a party. They say, what are you, stupid? I want to hang out with my friends. What are you, stupid? Well, let me tell you what I think about ABCD. I don't want to hear your thoughts. What are you, stupid? And then what's going to happen to you is that you're going to say, I have been disrespected. This guy doesn't like me. I'm an American. I have the right to free speech, but every time I open my mouth to say a few things, he just slaps me down. It's no way to do business, right? But what happens is there is this, I think, magical connection between Gilgamesh, the man who has but has forgotten, and Enkidu, the man who has and never forgets. So somehow these two people need to meet. But here's the thing. Enkidu does not want to see human beings. He doesn't want to come to Oakland. He doesn't want to talk to people. He's fine with hanging out with animals, with the goats and the sheep and the rats. He's fine. He doesn't need to see Beyonce dance. He can see the leaves move around. That's fine for Enkidu. I mean, these are great lessons for those of us in this class who are bored and you find life to be mundane a little, okay? Or you want to perhaps inject some life into your boring life. or you want to be inspired, these texts, epics, epic is like, it has all of life in it. A story is nothing. It's just about you and your life. An epic is about everybody's life. And so there is only one way to bring Enkidu to the city so he can meet Gilgamesh. Through a woman. Sex. Make someone have sex with Enkidu. Now, I don't want to go into sex right now because it happens to be one of those ancient arts, okay, that allows you a glimpse into, say, the world of God. If that's a bit too much, it allows you a glimpse into the reality of who and what you could be. Okay. It's not like, pornography in the ancient world had a completely different use than it is now. I will tell you a story about Jesus and his approach to sex when Mary Magdalene approached him to ask him some questions about that, but I'll save that for another day, which is very much in line with tantric philosophy of the East and Rosicrucians, the mystical sect in Christianity. Now, once Enkidu becomes contaminated with sex and loses some of his powers, he's brought into the city. The moment Enkidu and Gilgamesh meet, something happens, and I don't know what it is. And that's, it's like you go to a party, you see someone, and there is this instant attraction. And you want to figure it out, but you can't. And it's not meant to be figured out. Okay? And so what usually happens in such cases, if someone really has something valuable to give you, is that the wrestling match begins. Enkidu doesn't like Gilgamesh, Gilgamesh doesn't like Enkidu. They fight. They fight for 7 days and 7 nights until they become friends. Now, in a love relationship, what usually happens is someone always has a bit more power. The person who loves less has more power over the person who loves more. In other words, if I love you, okay, like if you love me and I love you times 2, which means I have more love for you than you do for me, I am willing to wait by my phone for a phone call coming from you for 5 hours. You will wait for no more than 5 minutes. Okay. So because I love you more, I will allow you to bully me more, abuse me more, harass me more. And because I love you more, my patience for your harassment grows. You can bully me more, and I can be okay with it. So remember, in love relationships, one person always has more power, which means it has more dominance. Okay? And if this person happens to be a jerk, now that is like real abuse. Okay? And you will end up not having grown intellectually or spiritually or emotionally, but you'll seek a therapist for the next 20 years of your life, right? So that's the difference between loving someone's soul versus loving someone's body, and then out of body emotions come out, and then from that point on is damage control for the next 20 years. Despite the fact that Gilgamesh is a king, he becomes a servant or a slave to Enkidu. Enkidu is a nobody. But because Gilgamesh loves more, he sacrifices more. At a certain point when there is enough maturity, and by that I mean the following. If you were to go home, if this class ends today, in about a few minutes, and you walk away from this class always thinking about the things we talked about today, and if you lose focus in your math class because you're thinking about our conversation, and when you go home, as you're walking home, you think about our conversation, and if you like cooking, you're thinking about our conversation. The truth is, you're not really thinking about conversation, you're thinking about me, okay? Because I am the vehicle through which conversation is taking place. Okay? It means that something about you and something about me is gelled, glued together. And if you have used super glue, it's going to be really, really tough to break them apart. When Enkidu dies, a good amount of space inside Gilgamesh is occupied by Enkidu. That's not something you find elsewhere. I mean, look, we had a secretary to the president on this campus, about maybe 10, 15, 20 years ago. All of a sudden, we get this email on a Saturday that the secretary's husband died. On Wednesday, she was dating. Which means what? Well, her companion, whoever her husband was, okay. And going back to Richard's question about life being a little boring and groundhoggish, that there is nothing about your companion that inspires you to worship him. He doesn't have a soul. There is no temple to worship. He's just some guy with some money, with a car, with a penis. Once in a while you guys have sex, once in a while you guys go out and have food, but that's basically it. He is replaceable, as most of us are. Okay? My own teacher, Hussein, who died about 2-3 years ago because of cancer, he was a writer, and he was like, for me, he was like a Jesus Christ. His wife was an artist, and for her, he was like a Jesus Christ. She is unable to date anyone. Why? Because she can't find anyone like Hussein. If you have found someone like a Malcolm X, you could hang out with 50 million black people. They're not going to be Malcolm. If you have found a Jesus Christ, you can hang out with 8 billion people on this planet. You're not going to find a Jesus. There is something very unique about these people. You're not going to find a Mahatma Gandhi. You're not going to find a Muhammad Ali. You're not going to find a Mike Tyson or a Tiger Woods or a Magnus Carlsen. And the point is, life creates these freaks like a Jesus or a Moses or a Muhammad or a Lao Tzu or a Malcolm. Okay? And then they bother us. They bother us because they tell us that we're just dumbasses, that we need to aspire to be like them. Okay. Now, the problem with Gilgamesh is that he says after the death of Enkidu, I don't want to go back to my city. There is no one there. There is no one to talk to. There is no one to worship. There is no one to respect. People suck. Their life is stupid. The content of the conversation is stupid. And so he says, you know what? I'm just going to go into the forest to figure out if there is something out there that I can kind of latch myself onto. So remember, if you like someone because of how good looking their body is, that is like a gallon of milk. It'll expire in about 3 weeks. If you like someone because sometimes you sit and they tell you, oh, let me tell you what my father did to me. Oh, let me tell you what life did to me. And they're like whining all the time. Okay? But you're at a place in your life where you like to play the Messiah figure. Oh, yes, tell me more. I'll help you. You want money? I'll give you money. I'll give you support. Okay? And remember, there will come a time, the longevity for people who have emotional crisis, and you like broken people like that, okay? Because their life is a complete mess, and you want to hang out with them because you assume that you can fix them. The longevity for that max maybe 7 months, because before you're completely exhausted. If you love someone because they think well, and they can speak their thoughts well, you can be mesmerized, infected by the way they think. And they're going to generate feelings about you. And you're going to like not only the thoughts, but also the emotions. The longevity for that is maybe 2 years, maybe 3 years, if you're lucky. If you find someone who has a soul and you find that you're slowly falling in love with them, okay, what's going to happen is you will never ever be able to go back into life and fall in love with someone's body or emotions or intellect. You're looking for a soul. And I don't know how to describe or define what the soul is. All I can say is I have read a lot of books. You're not going to find a Khalil Gibran out there. Maybe one, maybe two. You know, you can't find a Carlos Castaneda. Not too many of them out there. Any genius in any field, you're only going to find a handful. And if you are cursed, not blessed, but cursed, to run into one of them and then be infected by them, you're like a butterfly that has been touched by a human hand. Once the oil from your fingers touch the butterfly's wings, it can no longer fly. You can no longer laugh the way other people do. You can no longer cry the way other people do. Something about you has just been changed and changed permanently. No, that's true. Butterfly, yeah. What time is it, by the way? I don't want to keep myself here as long as.
10:35.
Okay. Yeah.
Should we just only follow narratives that serve humans?
What do you mean?
You were talking, at one point you were talking about how narratives, we should follow narratives that don't support us.
Okay.
And I was wondering if we should only follow narratives that do support us.
There is this saying in one of the Gospels, and I don't know which one, that a human being, in the Gospel it says man, but just to make it gender neutral these days, so human beings do not live by bread alone. Now, one of the things you need to understand about bread is that people have different needs. Some people have physical needs, like food, shelter, clothing. Some people have emotional need. They need a parental figure because they never had any. They need that emotional support. Some people need intellectual bread. You know, that your physical life is fine, emotionally you're fine, but like Richard, you sit back and you say, you know, life is boring. It has nothing to give me. Give me something to think about. You know, I want to chew on some idea, you know. And then there is the spiritual bread. Now, here's the thing. If you're homeless and Jesus is running past by you and he looks at you and you say, Jesus, give me some bread. And he says, buddy, here's a Bible. Well, that's a stupid thing to do. A homeless man who hasn't eaten for like 5 days, he needs like a loaf of bread. Go to Ike's, buy this person a sandwich and give him that. Don't give him a Bible. Bible is useless. Okay. So when you talk about what people need, the question is, what sort of a need do you have? If your need is food, when you come to my office, for example, and I ask you, so Elise, how are you doing? I'm so hungry. Well, shit, if you're hungry, you're distracted by the cries of your belly. It's stupid for me to speak to you about your grade, about your essay, about how important it is for you to graduate. I'm just going to like open the fridge and give you a sandwich. Once your belly is full, and once you've taken a nap, once you've drank some water to push this food down your throat, then I say, okay, what now? Say, well, you know, the truth is, I don't have anywhere to stay tonight. I say, here's my office key. Stay here. Okay? The tower building is open until 6 o'clock. Do whatever you want. Before 6, come back to the tower, go to the 4th floor, stay in my office. When I come in the morning, leave. I don't want to see your face. Okay? Once that's over, okay, you go down and it's raining. And all you have is like a t-shirt. So well, I'm really cold. Here's my fucking jacket. Go away. I don't want to see your face again. Then you come back. Food, shelter, clothing. Those needs have been satisfied. Then all of a sudden you say, Amir, you know my future. I have no idea what I'm going to do. I don't want to be poor. Do you have any suggestions? I say, Elise, now that your body is protected, your belly is protected, okay, you have a place to stay, take however many classes that you possibly can. 50 units. Get it done. I'll help you. Take all my classes. That's like 50 units right there. And I have colleagues here and there. Take their classes. Finish it up. And now you graduate. You have a job. And then 10 years later, all of a sudden, if I'm still alive, you open the door, you come to my classroom, you say, Amir, hi. Hey, Elise, what's going on? I have everything. I'm just not happy. Now you have a different need. I can't give you what I think is good for you. before first knowing what exactly you're deficient in. I can tell you, Elise, come to my office, let me give you some philosophy. The best I can do, come to my office, let me see in what ways you're broken. But for that to happen, first I need to like you. Then I have to figure out if I'm willing to waste my time with you. And because I'm relatively seasoned, any wrong moves on your part, I'm going to kick you out. Just don't have the patience. Now, sometimes you don't really have any needs. Your life is relatively good. Then you'll run into someone who will create a need for you. Let's say Richard is your husband or your companion. You guys are happy. But I just talked about Gilgamesh and Enkidu. And then as I'm talking, you look at Richard and you say, man, I don't like him physically. I don't like him sexually. I don't like him emotionally. I don't like him intellectually. But we have 5 kids together. And he provides. He's a good man. But all of a sudden, you say, you know what? What I really want is a man who has a soul. Now I've created this need inside you. And as long as this need is something you focus on, the more you interact with Richard, the less you're going to like him. And God forbid, if there's a God out there, one day, 2, 3, 4, 5 months, you're going to look at him and say, Richard, you know I love you, but I just can't stay with you. You're suffocating me. Just, I'll make you a room. No, I just don't want to be in the space that you occupy as well. I'll move to a different city. No, I can still smell you. You're just dead to me. So sometimes everything about your life is relatively okay, but someone creates a need, and that need disrupts you. But here's the thing. Should you have any needs that you know, and those needs happen to be fundamental, I can't give you anything. Because you have to come to me and reveal your story. You need to, hypothetically speaking, you need to come to me and say, Amir, listen, when I was 2, A, B, C, D happened, and when I was 5, E, F, G, H happened, when I was 12, F and J happened. And the only way you can do that, reveal yourself, is for you to trust me, to like me, to feel safe and comfortable. But because most of your life, you have walked very cautiously in relationships, okay? There's a good chance that you're going to come to my office, knock on the door, just say, Amir, I just came to say hi. You change your mind, you go back down. So people who have been broken fundamentally, they're very, 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 very difficult to kind of put them back together. Not impossible, just difficult. It's good to see all of you. Have a nice day. Erica, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. We could stay, I don't really mind, but if you want to leave, now is the time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Going back to the butterfly.